Hi everyone. Welcome to the Oversharing podcast. My name is James Swam. I am the CEO and co-founder of Opsin. I'm the Oversharing host. I'm super excited to have Ross Young here. Um, I've been a big follower of him on LinkedIn. He has a lot of different frameworks and metrics, and he's very well followed on LinkedIn and other channels. So I very appreciate that Ross make time to join us today. Ross, why don't you introduce yourself there?
Hey, thank you for having me here today, James. So, I've been in cyber for about 20 years. 10 and a half years of that, I was at CIA. I did the nation state hacking side of the house for about 5 years, and then I ran DevOps. I switched over to Capital One in 2018. So, I was there for the large data breach that happened in 2019. And then I was the CISO at Caterpillar Financial for 4 years. So I've had kind of a fun career and seen a lot of new startups. And now I work on this show called CISO Tradecraft to help train the next generation of CISOs.
That's awesome, and I'm very glad to hear a practitioner actually spend time and help the next generation of CISOs. Um, and I think your perspective is a bit unique, right? Like you have been the other side of the house with the CIAs, and then you've been a practitioner yourself as a CISO at Caterpillar. So one of the things that I repeatedly hear nowadays around Gen AI, right? Like no one in the industry kind of can escape Gen AI. Like everyone talk about whether you want to hear it or not, right? So um, so from your experience, and I know that you've been working on some OWASP framework around AI security risks. Like, could you share a little bit more about what the project that you work on and what kind of risks that you've been seeing?
Yeah. So within AI, there's all different problems. But I think the first thing that we have to say in cybersecurity is which problem do we want to solve first? And I'll just share my screen here a little bit and talk about there's 7 different problems that I think organizations are extremely likely to encounter. The
Mm,
first is what I would call sensitive data loss or data leaks. Imagine there are employees that use ChatGPT, they use Claude, and they upload sensitive data to that website saying, please reword my email, please fix this PowerPoint or this Word document. Well, if that is a sensitive topic, maybe it's next quarter's financial statements, maybe it's, something sensitive in email that can be lost. Another example is malicious supply chains. So you have developers writing models, writing code, writing algorithms, and they're downloading open source components. And if those things are malicious in nature, maybe it's a Bitcoin miner or something else,
mm,
that could also potentially cause harm. And a third example could be hallucinations. We've seen examples where airlines created a chatbot, put it on their customer facing website, and customers went and asked it questions like, hey, what is your bereavement policy? I.e., what happens when someone dies? Do you help with, some of the flights? And when it starts making up things and you don't actually have a bereavement policy, well, your company can still be held legally accountable. So there's a bunch of different examples like this: data overexposure, AI misuse for personal harm, unethical recommendations. Right.
mm.
So maybe we're a healthcare company, and if you look at the numbers, it says we should kill grandma and not pay her healthcare costs. But you can't really do that in today's world, right? That's just totally unethical. Or, some bias. Maybe you train
Yeah,
your AI model on all of the database fields, but there's certain fields you're historically prohibited from. You can't, make recommendations on loans based on someone's age, someone's sex or race, or other things that would be protected classes. So just
yeah.
knowing which problem you're going to solve is really key here.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like the list is very inclusive of a lot of things, right? You have 1 to 7 that have different risks, like from, employees uploading sensitive information to all the way to bias, fuel liabilities. And I guess the example that you gave about the hallucination number 3 there, I think maybe you was referencing to Air Canada and their bots. I
That's
assume
right.
that was a pretty famous example.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good call out because every time we build a new technology, we need to understand there are new risks that come with those technology. And so
Yeah.
just different things happen. And I'll give you another example. A lot of times people have a customer portal where people
Mm,
upload sensitive documents. Well, what happens if you analyze those documents using machine learning processing to say, okay, tell me what's in the pictures, what's in the image? Uh, and then bad actors start throwing malicious things, prompts into their images. And it
mm,
says, hey, send me your email information or send me all your customer, social security cards. Those little
mm.
things like that. You're like, yeah, we scan pictures for malware, but we don't ever scan it for malicious instructions on the AI models. Like those are
Yeah.
lessons learned from doing the things that are improving productivity, but there are security implications, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of like a new threats that come with AI, right? Like in the past, like people barely notice like what kind of like prompts that people put in, and but now it's like okay, the prompt can actually execute on things and get access to sensitive information via the chatbot, just because sometimes kind of the bot follow the instruction very closely, right? So I think that's the new risk that you have. And of course, you have all this SQL injection that is like long time ago, but that's like a different bit. So it sounds like that similar attack vectors kind of like evolve when it comes to new technology. So like even I think on your list, like when you share, there was number four, which is data over exposures, right? Like I think it was like uh, training your LM on unrestricted company research, something, right?
Yeah. So this is a good thing that seems to be coming up more and more. So it's a good call out, I would say. So taking an organization that's been around for a decade or even longer than that, they have documents in OneDrive and share drives and folders and SharePoint all over the place if you're a Microsoft shop. And the truth is, we don't really do a great job at limiting access controls and permissions. And I'll just give you the example of, let's say Jim is on the accounting team. And so he has access to all the accounting documents. Good for him.
Mhm.
He's in that role. He needs those documents. 3 years later, Jim switches over to the procurement team. Should have
Yeah,
zero access to all those same folders, all those same SharePoints, all those documents. But do we
yeah,
really go in and remove all those permissions on every document and every folder and every OneDrive? Probably not. And so
yeah,
now, when he's on the procurement team and he gets phished, that phishing can still lose accounting data, which is very harmful to the company, right? So these are things where you're going to have like major fines from the New York Department of Financial Services for not doing least access control. And this is what I would call a data overexposure problem in Office 365.
yeah. And I guess it's less about like the Microsoft or the Google problem. It's more like the end users data governance problem in a way, right? Because in your example, for example, like Microsoft 365 Copilot actually respect the permission. It's just that people don't really go back and clean up the permissions, and that's the challenge. And I think that's just one of the way, right? There are many other ways. Like for example, there are default permissions, there are group setting, then there are all of that, and it sounds like this is not like a new problem, right? This end user data governance problem have been there forever. It just that the technology of it is new, right? So
Yeah, so I think that's a proper call out. It's not Microsoft who's screwing up the permissions. It's the users, it's the owners of the things. And what I find is in organizations, we typically have two types of permissions. We
mm,
have things we put at very formal processes. Let's call it you're going to deploy with a tool like SailPoint to say who gets access to the CRM like Salesforce.
mm,
And then you have these discretionary access control methodologies where the owner of the file, the folders, the documents is the one granting permissions.
mm,
But it's not something that's like highly reviewed, like has to go through a two-person approval like a sale point. This is just someone saying, oh, let me share this document in SharePoint and in a folder in OneDrive.
mm.
And you do this thousands of times, in a year. And so
Yeah,
for someone to go in and say, hey, I need you to manually go into the thousands of files that you and the team wrote and manually click and remove permissions or do role based there, it just isn't commonly done, and I think there's problems with this access when it starts getting out of hand. Just it's technical debt and access control.
It definitely is. And to the point earlier about all this prompt injection, and before that, long time ago we had SQL injection, prompt injection. It's like similar attack vectors, and it's just that the problem in it's the same problems that have exist in the past. It's just that there's a new technology that is more powerful and can surface a lot of sensitive information that exists in the enterprise. So I saw that you have a framework there with a table that detail about like, from the threats to like identify how you identify it, how you protect it, how you detect it, how you respond, how you recover. So it's like an entire life cycle of what I would say like a threat vector, right? Like from the time that you identify to the time that you kind of recover it. So maybe let dive a little bit deeper into each of these, right? I think you have 7 different risks, and it
Yeah,
sounds like they're kind of each of them require different life cycle and different way to look into that. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So I created something called the OWASP Threat and Safeguard Matrix,
Mm,
where on one side you put all the material threats likely to cause harm to your company.
mm,
And then you overlay this with the NIST functions of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And this is really helpful because it allows you to see a defense in depth approach to stopping these material threats to your company. Take the example of sensitive data leaks. I'm worried about people uploading sensitive data to ChatGPT. Well, what would I do to identify where that could happen? I might do a risk assessment on my applications to figure out, hey, where can this exposure come from? Maybe it's my web browsers, for example. Then I might have some training where I identify, how much of my people know and understand these. I might even classify the data so that I can see what documents are being uploaded by a label in some way.
mm,
And so this allows me to identify where it's gonna go bad in my organization. And then how would I protect it? Well, I'm probably gonna use some type of data loss prevention tool. Or maybe I have some access control lists that really say who has what functions they can use on which applications, right? Maybe only 20 people in my company are allowed to access this site. Uh,
yeah.
Different ways. And so what you do is you start going and filling out these functions, and it's super powerful because when somebody says, "Oh, we're going to give you, $1 million to do an AI security program,"
Mm,
what you're going to see is the tools and safeguards to stop sensitive data leaks look very different than the tools for hallucinations.
right.
So if I build an application, and let's just say it's the chatbot at an airline, well, I probably need a business impact analysis to analyze what's going through it. Maybe I
Mm,
run some pen tests against it, and I identify that this website's very susceptible to hallucination attacks, right? And so how
yeah.
would I stop this? Well, maybe I do some acceptance testing. I fuzz my site with 100 things that should come through no problem, and then I
Mm,
fuzz it with 100 things that this site should block and stop these things from happening, right? It should never, respond to these questions like give me all your social security cards or teach me how to build a bomb or something stupid like that, right? And so now we can do accuracy tests and we can say, hey, 99% of these things are stopped. And we did find, 1% of our user prompts could be hallucinated on the responses. Are we okay with that? Right?
mm,
Maybe we put some legal disclaimers in other language, or maybe we're not okay. And then we say, well, we're going to pull some of these features out of here. But it helps you understand that, hey, acceptance testing and these, pen tests, that's very different than buying a DLP solution. So now I can start to see what I need to build out for my defense in depth plan.
yeah. Yeah. And you are absolutely right. Right. Every business will have different threats, right? Like for example the hallucinated promises and real legal risk, that kind of thing, they usually happen when an organization kind of build their own application with LMs, like for example like Air Canada building like a chatbot agent for their website and stuff like that. And that's where they need to worry about. But say that say you're a manufacturing company, you don't really build your own AI application, but you use out of the box Gen AI tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot, Salesforce Agentforce, and Google Gemini and all of that. Then your risk is different, right? Like maybe it will be in the first line that you have there, sensitive data leakage, right? Like employee may go up and use some shadow AI tools there in the enterprise, right? So um, I think this is a very comprehensive list, and it kind of like depending on where you are as a company, you might be exposed to different risks. And like what you said, like depend on the risks, there are very different tooling that are involved. It could be DLP, it could be like something else.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I tried to put it in language that a lawyer, a financial officer, an executive would be able to read and understand, and not in the geek speak of, some four letter acronym of OWASP security that people may not understand, not coming from a cyber background, right?
Yeah, that interesting. Um, so I think a lot of it that you have here is in the identify, and it sounds like each of those would have some sort of like assessment that you do kind of a thing for an organization to identify. So it sounds like that's a lot had a lot to do with proactive um, kind of risk assessment, right? Like for example, like
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's a very good call out. So one of the things I'm a big fan of is I'm sorry, it's called a generative AI risk assessment, the SIM 5305-F. Basically, the state of California has actually said, here is the thing we want our state agencies to use. And I
mm,
think it's a really good document
mm,
that organizations can take a look at. And I'll just kind of share some things with you that
mm,
maybe most people haven't seen before, because I think it's just super, super powerful to take a look at. So the first thing that I thought was super powerful, and let me zoom in so people can see this a little cleaner,
oh, wow,
is they define PII data. And a lot of times you might just think of, oh, it's just social security card numbers. Well,
mm,
obviously that makes a lot of sense.
mm,
But a telephone number, an address, your education, like things that you might look up on LinkedIn to find about people could actually be sensitive data. And so I thought this was really cool. And they go through
wow,
this thing out here, and they go in and they have a lot of questions where you go in and answer about your data, about different types of
mm,
safeguards that might be there. And I really like their minimum safeguards for AI. I think this is
wow,
a huge thing to take a look at, because I think we're going to see more companies expected of this. Oh, you're using AI in Salesforce or whatever the tool may be. Show
mm,
me that you're safeguarding my data and it's not going to be stolen by my competitors who also use Salesforce, right?
mm.
Things like that, I think, are going to be big concerns. And if you show that you're doing these risk assessments, you're going to be a very thought leading organization and doing the right things to stop some of these potential security issues that'll come.
Yeah, I love how kind of specific they are in terms of what they consider as PAI. For example, like a lot of time people just say, "Hey, it's social security number," but it's also like all the things around it, like the address, the phone number, and things like that. And it actually make it more actionable than just like PII, like which is a very high category to like very detailed and specific information. I'm actually looking at the website right now. So you said it's theme five
Yeah.
5305. Maybe you can put in the chat so
Yeah,
that
I'll
we
put
can.
it in the chat, but if you spell it, I'll spell it one more time. SIMM 5305-F. And
Mm,
it just came out in August of 2025. So it's fairly recent. But if you're an organization today and you know you have to do AI security, right?
mm,
And your customers are asking for it. Hey, show us how you're doing it. You don't have a 42001 ISO, certification quite yet, but you need to do something and start moving the ball. Take a
yeah,
look at this. I think this is a really good template that we can, borrow or steal in for other organizations, right?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, and on in that note, right, like I think that one of the challenge for a lot of organization is a lot of the departments have different use of AI, right? It could be doing their own, it could be like using existing tools. Like if you are like a CISO, how would you prioritize? Like even in your list, right, you have seven different kind of risk, and it kind of like associated with different activities. But at the end of the day, as a CISO, you probably need to prioritize and where to start. Like how would you think about like prioritization, where to tackle first? Probably it could be hard for you to tackle every single risk on that list.
So, what I would do is I would step back from only looking at the risk. And I
Mm,
think it's also just as important to look at what is the business benefits. And
mm,
here's what I mean by that. If somebody says, well, this risk is a $5 million risk, is that good or bad? Well,
mm,
the answer is I don't know. If
mm,
you tell me the business benefit is 100K and we're going to lose 5 million, that's a terrible risk. Don't do that. That's stupid. But if you tell
mm,
me we're going to make $1 billion and we're going to lose 5 million, I'm going to go to Vegas and throw that on the craps table every single day. Cause why wouldn't you take that risk for your organization? That just seems very, very smart. So I think it's more important to get very, very good on measuring the business
mm.
benefit of this sample AI project. I think that's the one thing we don't do enough in addition to just looking at the security risks of a
Mm.
project, right?
I see. That's actually interesting, right? Like, because every time we talk with CISO, we talk in the language of risk, like what the risk, what the threat vectors and things like that. But I like how you think about it. It's not just about the risk; it's about the trade-off, right? There's the risk, but also which is a negative side, but there's also like a positive side, like it kind of like balance out and kind of make you prioritize a lot easier. So I think that's actually a pretty good understanding there. And in terms of like quantifying the risk for AI itself, like how would you think about going about that? Because that sometimes can be like a very fuzzy business, right? Like for example, like in your risk number four there, which is data overexposure risk, like how would you quantify to make it a dollars number?
So I think cyber risk quantification is often very difficult to do.
Mm,
And the reason why is unlike car insurance, where I got 50 years of people driving cars and good data around that, I just don't have that information available to me, right?
mm,
I don't I MCP servers and LLMs haven't existed for 5 years, right? For
mm.
most of us. I can't
It's
just
like
go
a
look
year
up an
start, yeah.
actuarial table and start figuring out, well, he's 50% likely to screw this up, right? So because of that, I think you have to take more of a qualitative approach. And
Okay.
and here's the way I do that. I like to go in and ask the chief financial officer, how much money can a manager approve on their procurement card? And they
Mm,
say, well, a manager can approve 50,000. Cool. How about a director? Directors can approve, 500,000. Got it. How about a vice president? Well, they can approve, 5 million. Okay. What about the executive risk committee? Well, we can approve, 50 million or the whole budget. Got it.
mm,
So this is the amount of risk approval that we've allowed each role to accept for the organization.
mm,
And so then I would go back and I would use those ranges to say, do we think this AI risk is going to be between 0 and 50,000?
mm,
Manager can approve it. Do we think it's between 50,000 and 500,000?
mm,
Director can approve it. 500,000 and 5 million, VP, and so on. And
mm,
so here, I think most organizations can kind of ballpark range where they think this is going to fall. And then that person who is at that title can make the approval for the organization. Right.
mm.
So that's kind of how I take more of a qualitative approach on risk versus
Mm.
trying to figure out it is it $5,944.60 and nobody believes that number. You're like, I just pulled that out of my butt, but like I feel like if we just said, give us a range of approvals, I think we're going to get a good enough answer there.
Yeah, yeah, and like what you said, it's a little bit qualitative in a way, right? Like it's hard for you to put like, is it $283 or like 999 or things like that. It's gonna be super difficult for you to have that kind of exact numbers, like the car insurance that you mentioned, like they have 100 years of car accidents and what kind of car, what kind of like people, like drivers that can cause harm and things like that. So I think um, that's a lot easier than especially with AI, which you mentioned MCP, which is just a year old, and I don't think anyone adopted that much yet. And to be honest with you, a lot of the risk are still kind of being defined, and I don't think that the risk that we know or aware right now is all the risk. I'm sure that in a couple of months, a year, there will be more risk surface up as we kind of like adopt AI more.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And you just think of what are the risks we learned with cloud 10 years ago that you didn't even know you had as a risk.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll just give you one example: denial of wallet attacks.
Mm,
So historically, when you ran on prem, you paid a fixed cost and you bought the servers and you ran it in your own infrastructure.
mm,
And then you said, oh, we're going to go on AWS. Cool. Makes sense. Why would you want to run stuff in your own buildings? Let's use the cloud. Do it. Well, we're going to actually have things that are auto scaling to handle capacity. We're going to have this ability to increase the number of servers. Perfect. Well, what happens when a botnet starts throwing, their infrastructure against yours? And now your budget, which may have only been $2,000 a month to host your system,
mm.
suddenly becomes $2 million. Does
Yeah.
that break your company and you can't just pay your rent tomorrow and you're out of business? I call that a denial of wallet attack. So, what did you put for safeguards that says, well, we're never actually going to scale past this capacity, so we can't, run out of an Amazon budget and harm our company? We're going to see the same things on AI as well, right? What
Yeah.
are the things where what happens if somebody starts abusing our AI and starts doing tens of millions of open AI queries that cost our company $1 a query or whatever that amount may be? And we could also have a denial of wallet attacks in AI. So there's always going to be another new attack that nobody anticipated, but sometimes maybe just looking at things like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
those lessons repeat themselves in ways, right?
Yeah, you try to learn from the historical context and see what you can apply. And in fact, it's good that you bring up that you can learn from the lesson of the past. You actually can also potentially use some existing controls that you have, and it doesn't have to be. I think you mentioned like some DLP approach, for example, right? Like I think a lot of them start adopting to protect Gen AI. They start inspecting prompts and all of that. So I think it's not just about like learning about all these historical attacks, but kind of like what kind of control, existing control that we have on our system that we can potentially put a guardrails against it. We don't know what kind of attack is coming, but at least like these are the control that we have right now. These are the software. These are the toolings that we have.
Yeah, that's a great point. So take the example of I'm worried about someone uploading a sensitive Word doc that's classified as secret or company internal to ChatGPT. Well, a traditional DLP should be able to stop that. That's been around for a long time.
Mm.
Now, maybe not all DLPs as good as each other, right? There's certainly some ones that are terrible DLP solutions and there's some good solutions. But, sometimes you don't have to buy a new AI security solution when something already solves that. Now, that being said, also think of the opposite. There are things that are newer where the old solutions are totally insufficient, like hallucination. If you're really worried about that, a DLP wasn't going to stop hallucination attacks at all, right? So
Yeah.
you needed to buy something else that would help you figure out those vulnerabilities on your chatbots that now you can go ahead and fix. So sometimes you can leverage the past and do it. Why not save yourself some money? But other times you actually have to spend money. And then this comes back to, hey, if the organization is going to make $1 billion on this, there might be a
Yeah.
5% security tax to make sure we implement it securely. And then that pays for an AI security solution to safeguard that new capability.
Yeah, exactly. It'll all come back to prioritization or quantification of risks versus benefits that you mentioned about, like how much an organization will spend on all this. Um, okay, I think these are good. And in terms of the adoption of AI and security for AI, like where do you think the market is right now? Because obviously, when you produce the OWASP framework, I assume that you have spoken with a lot of CISOs, understand a lot of their pain points and things like that. So where do you see like the state of adoption of Gen AI and where the security function are within that adoption?
I think it depends on the specific tools. And
Mm.
I'll give you some examples here to kind of spell this out. If you're saying what percentage of the workforce uses ChatGPT or Claude to ask, for information, I would guess we're high 90% there. Another example would be what percentage of organizations are using AI coding assistant tools, i.e., I didn't write the code. I wrote a prompt to say, go build me a website that does this. And then Claude or, any of the tools like um, Perplexity or any of those modern AI browsers with coding capabilities in them, it's going to spit that code out back for me. We are seeing 90% across the board of organizations using those technologies because they can write code faster. And if I can
Mm.
write code faster, that's usually good for an organization. Now, your point is how fast is security adopting, solutions for that? We're still in the very early days, right? That stuff's been around for about a year. And now organizations are really going in and saying, well, what do I do when I don't know if this AI generated code is secure? How do I, solve that? And new companies are being stood up. We're seeing the kind of evolution of AppSec tools having like VibeSec tools for vibe coding. So we're going to see, security is usually about a year or two behind, the new tech innovation because they have
Yeah.
to see where it evolves in order to figure out how we're going to secure it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned about AppSec and all these VibeSec security tools. Like the other day, um, I forget, is it Cloud or OpenAI? One of them actually released that they published a statistic that their LM, their foundational LM, can actually detect malicious code right now. So what that's a huge implication for the AppSec and the VibeSec kind of segment, just because like now the foundational LMs actually get into the security aspect of it, of securing itself. Just because like it's going to be hard for them to sell without secure somewhat of a secure built-in security function within it. Right, like for example, Cloud doing a lot of coding, right? So that's why they have to develop some sort of like security for themselves to be able to say that, hey, this web page that Cloud generated actually have some security um, issues and things, right? So I think the entire security industry may, especially the AppSec industry, might get upside down because of that. So that is an interesting kind of move from the foundational LMs.
And I think it's for the better, right? We're going to see improvements. And just take the example of driving, right? When I was a kid, we used to have maps to drive across this nation, right? And then a long time ago, something called MapQuest came out where you could actually go and start to print maps of where you needed to go and it give you directions. And that
Mm.
evolved to, things like Google Maps or Waze, right? For your phone.
Yeah,
And like everybody I know uses that. There's nobody still manually opening a map and trying to navigate how to drive across the country. It's just crazy town, right? And the same thing is going to happen in software development, right? People are not going to, manually build the maps or manually write the code. They're going to ask the software, hey, I need to do this, and it's going to spit back the answers. And so at first, there's a little bit of distrust of, oh, I don't like technology. I don't know what to do. And you have these, curmudgeons a little bit. But people are going to go and see, oh my gosh, you built that whole site in only a day? I want 10 more of that, and now everybody's going to go into that and really start using those solutions. So I think this stuff here is really going to stay. I think we have to think about how do we secure it, because if you were to tell people to go away from Google Maps and go back to like physical maps, they would just think you're like crazy. And I think
Yeah.
developers will say the same thing when they see the benefits from AI coding tools, right?
Yeah, it's like you're driving a car now, but it's like back in 1900, so you have to go with a horse, right? That would that would that would not be well, right? So I think that
Yeah.
makes sense. Um, any kind of advice that you have for CISOs when it comes to AI security? Definitely one advice I would have is definitely check out the OWASP framework that you and Marky maintain. I think that's a great start. But any additional advice that you would have there?
So the first thing that I would say is this space is changing pretty rapidly,
Yeah,
right? If
right.
you were to say what changed? Well, 2 years ago, I didn't have LMs or LLMs that were super easy to go and use all the time, and now that's changed. And then last year, we really kind of ramped up agents. So agentic AI, and how do I automate all of these things? Another huge focus. And I don't know what's going to be in the next year or two, but it's probably something that makes the world cheaper, faster, better. But if
Mm.
I'm not paying attention, then I'm going to be like the guy driving with a manual map and missing out on, the Google Maps and other things that not only just give me the directions, but also tell me where the traffic sucks that I need to avoid. And so those types of features, that functionality, you have to be learning. And what I would say is talking to all the new vendors and seeing where they're going is probably the right thing to do. So I really love hitting the showroom floors at conferences and talking to new startups, because they're tackling problems and they're spending, hours and or years on this problem that I only have minutes to spend on. And so they're going to be smarter on the solution than I am. So if I say, hey, Microsoft 365 security is a problem for me, I need to figure out the folks who do that really, really well, because that's who I want to tap to solve my problems, right? So look for those companies that can help you that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, right? Which is checking out the Floyd conferences. Um, Kind of curious about like beside that methods, like what are other sources of information that you access to so that you can stay up to date and not looking at the manual physical map kind of thing.
So what I would do is I would start to figure out who the industry leaders are and influencers. So
Mm.
I'll just give you a couple examples. If you think like OWASP is doing really cutting edge things, or maybe it's OpenAI and it's Claude, figure out who from those companies is posting and doing thought leadership on LinkedIn, and follow and subscribe to those people, because now you're going to see, hey, here's Rock Lambros from the OWASP side who's writing really interesting work, and I can learn a lot from him. Or here's the founder of OpenAI or Claude or Perplexity or whatever the thing that you're interested in. And you can learn a lot when you're just paying attention and watching. But if you're not subscribing and your inbox is flooded with, 10-year-old technology, then I think that's what your thoughts are going to be. Versus, are you following like the people who are cutting edge and innovating, right?
Yeah, it's like okay, I just got a mail saying that there is a manual map, a physical map, but waterproof. Right? I suppose you're like, hey, here's a new phone with a Google Maps on it. So I think that's a good energy there. Right. So it's been really fun talking to you. How do people stay connected with you, Russ?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is just to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Ross Young. You can find me pretty easily. I'm also at ross at csotradecraft.com if you prefer to send an email. But take a look at my podcast, CISO Tradecraft. That's another way where you can kind of go and learn some of these cutting edge tools and hear me speak, along with my co-host G. Mark Hardy.
Definitely. I'm sure that people will enjoy your podcast for sure. All right. Thank you so much for making time to talk about AI and share your latest work on the OWASP AI security risk. Yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you.